Hello everyone and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding Mishnah Berurah Chelik Vav. We are continuing to learn Hilchos Chanukah. We'll be learning today Yitz Hashem Daf Kuf Lamed Tes Amud Aleph. We'll see how far we get. I would like to turn the page and do at least a piece of Kuf Lamed Tes Amud Beis, but let's see. Right now I'd like to begin on the bottom of Kuf Lamed Ches Amud Beis. I'm going to repeat something that we learned yesterday because there's a Biur Halacha that I want to take a look at. So on the very bottom line of Kuf Lamed Ches Amud Beis, Siman Taf Reish Ayin Aleph, near the end of Sif Daled, the very bottom line, in the words of the Ramah said, "V'yizaharu, we should take care kisha'osim neros, when we make candles." And over here, the Ramah is speaking about Neros Chanukah. Afilu b'shava, even if we make wax candles, she'en ledabkan b'yachad ulahadlikan, that we should not take the candles and melt them and stick them together, dehevi kimedura, because by doing so, we would be creating a madura, creating a torch. And we learned yesterday the halacha that the Neros Chanukah have to be Neros. They can't be torches. They have to be single Neros. Okay, now on the top of Kuf Lamed Tes Amud Aleph, the Ramah continued, and he said, Afilu b'Neros shel Shabbos v'Yom Tov yizaru shaloi lasos kain. The Ramah said that even on Shabbos and Yom Tov, we should take care not to do this. We should not stick candles together for Neros Shabbos or Neros Yom Tov. And if you take a look here in Mishnah Berurah Katan Chaf, the Chavetz Chaim said, Ayin bebiur halacha dibra maschil afilu. So let's take a look at that biur halacha. Biur halacha dibra maschil afilu b'Neros shel Shabbos. Miloshin zeh, from the language of the Ramah, mashma, it is implied, da'af b'Shabbos v'Yom Tov yesh lizahir shaloi lasos kain. It's interesting that the Chavetz Chaim says it's mashma, it's implied. That's clearly what the Ramah says. The Ramah says that on Shabbos and Yom Tov, we should not take two candles and stick them together to form a madura. Says the Biur Halacha, ve'ena kain, but l'chara the halacha is not like this. The b'Shabbos v'Yom Tov adarabah, mitzvah lasos kruchim, k'dela'el b'Siman Reish Samach Gimel. We learned in Siman Reish Samach Gimel that on Shabbos there's actually an inyan to have two wicks together. Why is that? Because we know that the minimum amount of neros that you light for Shabbos, a couple gets married, what does the wife light? She lights two neros. Now, I think a lot of people are under the misconception that the reason she lights two neros is one for her husband and one for herself. The real reason you light two neros is Zachar v'Shamar. So we light one for Zachar, one for Shamar. Now we know Chazal tell us Zachar v'Shamar b'dibur echad. The Rabbeinu Shalom said Zachar and Shamar both at the same time. A person cannot say two words at the same time. It's even difficult to hear two words that are uttered at the same time. But the Rabbeinu Shalom said Zachar v'Shamar together at the same time. And because Zachar v'Shamar b'dibur echad, we learned in Siman Reish Samach Gimel that there's actually an inyan to take two candles and put them together. Now, Ukvar Hikshekain Magen Avram Sif Katan Daled, the Magen Avram actually asks this kasha over here. Why does the Ramah say that on Shabbos and Yom Tov you shouldn't put them together? V'ayin b'soif devarav, and the Biur Halacha says, if you take a look at the end of the Magen Avram, the Lefimai Damasik B'Shem Rashal, according to what the conclusion of the Rashal, the Aser B'Inyanenu Afilu B'Shtei Neros Kruchen, that by Chanukah, you're not allowed to even take two neros and stick them together. Memela ein shum bir ledivrei Ramah b'mashamasik ta'afilu b'neros shel Shabbos v'Yom Tov yesh lizar. There just doesn't seem to be a way to explain this Ramah over here, who says that on Shabbos and Yom Tov you should take care not to stick two candles together. Vayin b'Pri Megadim, the Chavetz Chaim says, take a look at the Pri Megadim, shegam hu nitchak ma'od b'divrei Ramah. So the Chavetz Chaim says that in his humble opinion, it seems the chaser kan prat echad aniskar ba'ar zarua, that there's one critical factor that was left out over here that the Ramah doesn't mention. Dahainu, which is Kishemedapkin oisan achar hadlakasan. If you stick the candles together after they were lit, ad shal yedei zeh, until you create a situation where because of this, mischamamos, the candles heat each other up, v'noiflois, and they melt and fall down. V'zeh be'emes aser bein b'Chanukah ubein b'Shabbos v'Yom Tov. And that is what's aser both on Shabbos and on Chanukah. V'zeh loshen Darkei Moshe. And indeed, if you look at the Darkei Moshe on the Torah, what he writes is, Kishemadlikin ner Shabbos or Chanukah or Yom Tov. When you light the licht of Shabbos or Chanukah or Yom Tov, v'doifkin haneroi smuchin zeh lozeh, and you attach the candles to each other very closely, ad shehein mischamamoi zu mizu, until you create a situation where each candle heats up the one next to it and melts it, v'noiteif hashava, so that the wax melts, and gan nichpalois v'noiflois, sometimes the candles actually bend and fall over, then loikimu ha-mitzvah, then you're not mekayim the mitzvah. Arzarua ad kan lushaynai, the Ramah brings this down from the Arzarua. Ula oisha emes kidvarai, and as a sign, says the Chavetz Chaim, that I'm right, shetzien barama Arzarua, v'aloi din arishon loy niskar klal ba'arzarua, ela din zeh. So in summation, when the Ramah says that there's a problem on Shabbos or on Yom Tov to take two candles and stick them together, the problem that he's referring to is if you have two candles that are stuck together in such a way that they weren't made to be that way, and now the wax is going to overheat and the candles might actually melt and fall over. Now on Chanukah that would be a problem. Besides the problem of Menorah, it's also, if it's going to bend over and fall over, then they're not going to burn for the shear. And if you lit them in such a way that they're unable to burn for the shear, then you aren't Yotze the mitzvah, hadlaka isa mitzvah. If the hadlaka was done in a manner that the candles cannot burn for the full shear, that would be a problem. And on Shabbos, that is also a problem. Now, another reason I wanted to mention this is just now we're after Chanukah, but people could remember even for next year. On more than one occasion, I've seen where a fire almost started from Chanukah licht with candles on the 6th, 7th, 8th day, where you have a lot of candles, especially on candle menorahs that have the shamash up above, where the heat from the candles on the bottom melt the candle that's up on top. It melts away the wax, and the shamash bends over and falls over. So that's something that you have to take care of. Okay, now we go to Sifhei. Says the Machaber, Ner Chanukah manichai al Pesach hasamuch l'rishus harabim mibachutz. The Iker mitzvah, the Iker takana of Chazal, when Chazal, Shabbos Gemara here, when Chazal were misakin Neres Chanukah, was to put the Chanukah menorah outside by the door. Ner Chanukah manichai al Pesach hasamuch l'rishus harabim mibachutz. We put it on the outside of the doorway going out to Rishus Harabim. Im habayis pasuach l'Rishus Harabim. If the house opens directly onto Rishus Harabim, manichai al peschai. So then you put the menorah outside your door going out to the Rishus Harabim. V'im yesh chotzer lifnei habayis. If the houses are constructed in the style of the times of the Mishnah, where you had multiple houses that opened onto a chutzner, onto a courtyard, and then the chutzner opened up onto Rishus Harabim. In that case, says the Mechaber, manichai al Pesach ha-chutzner. Then you don't put the menorah outside your door in the chutzner. Rather, everybody who lives in the chutzner would place their menorahs by the Pesach ha-chutzner, where the chutzner opens up to the Rishus Harabim. So again, if you look in the Brisa in Masechta Shabbos and Chaf Aleph Amud Beis, it says, where do you put the Neres Chanukah? You put them by the Pesach going to Rishus Harabim. Now there's a machlokes Rashi and Tosfos. Both Rashi and Tosfos agree. If the house opens up directly onto Rishus Harabim, where do you put the menorah? outside your doorway, right outside your doorway, where you go out to the Rishus HaRabim. The question is, what do you do if you live in a chutzner situation? If you have a lot of houses opening up onto a chutzner, and then the chutzner opens up onto Rishus HaRabim, where do you put the menorahs? According to Rashi, each house in the chutzner would place their menorah by their doorway going from the house to the chutzner. Not so, says Tosfos. Tosfos says, the Brisa says that you put the menorah by the door going to Rishus HaRabim. If you live in a chutzner situation, the door of your house doesn't go to Rishus HaRabim. It goes to the chutzner. So Tosfos says, if you have a chutzner situation, so even if there are 6 houses in the chutzner, everybody will place their menorahs at the doorway of the chutzner going to Rishus HaRabim. Now, whether according to Rashi or according to Tosfos, what's the point? The point is Persume Nisa. The point is to publicize the Nes of Chanukah. Who do we want to publicize it to? We want to publicize it to the B'nai Rishus HaRabim. We want to publicize it to the public. The public is out in Rishus HaRabim. That's why Tosfos says, let's put all the menorahs by the Pesach of the Chutzner going to the Rishus HaRabim. Rashi seems to hold that it's enough to publicize the Nes for the B'nai HaChutzner. Not only that, Rashi, I think, had a problem. If you have 6 houses opening onto a chutzner, now everybody's going to take their menorahs and put their menorahs by the doorway of the chutzner going to the Rishus HaRabim, then there's no connection between the menorahs and the individual homes. You have a whole slew of menorahs outside by the doorway of the chutzner going to the Rishus HaRabim, but the houses are back over there in the chutzner. So there's no connection between the houses and the menorahs. So Rashi says no. If the house opens directly onto Rishus HaRabim, so then fine. So then put a menorah by your door going to Rishus HaRabim. You accomplish both things. It's very clear that the menorah that's by your door is your menorah. So everybody sees that the people who live in your house lit menorah. And also you have Pasumei Nisa to Rishus HaRabim. If you have 6 houses opening to a chutzner, so you can't put all the menorahs over there by the doorway to Rishus HaRabim from the chutzner. No, put it by your door going out onto the chutzner. So now everybody sees that your house lit menorah, and there's also Pasumei Nisa to the B'nai HaChutzner. Okay, so that's the Machlokes Rashi and Tosfos, and the Mechaber paskins like Tosfos. That's why the Mechaber says, what do? Ner Chanukah manicha al Pesach HaSabach l'Rishus HaRabim mibachutz. The proper placement for the Ner Chanukah is by the doorway going to Rishus HaRabim on the outside for Pasumei Nisa, and now it depends. If the house opens directly to Rishus HaRabim, manicha al Pischai. So fine, put it by the door of your house. It's by your house, and there's Pasumei Nisa to Rishus HaRabim. But if your house opens onto a chutzner, and then the chutzner opens onto the Rishus HaRabim, menicha al Pesach HaChutzner. Paskins like Tosfos, where do you put the menorah? Where the chutzner opens to Rishus HaRabim. Even if there are 10 houses in the chutzner, everybody's going to put their menorahs by the opening of the chutzner to Rishus HaRabim. Because Pasumei Nisa to the Rishus HaRabim is what trumps all. If you take a look in the Bir Halacha, Dibra Maskal Pesach HaChutzner, the Chavetz Chaim says, Ritzaynoi Loimar, what the Mechaber wants to say over here is, V'shaloi Kedas Rashi. The Mechaber is clearly paskening like Tosfos, not like Rashi, to Soiver de Menichai al Pesach HaBayis HaPasuach LaChutzner. Rashi holds, you put it by your door opening onto the chutzner, not where the chutzner opens onto Rishus HaRabim. But the Mechaber clearly paskins like Tosfos. Mishnah Berurah is cut in Chaf Aleph, mi ba'chutz. The Mechaber said, you put the menorah outside the doorway, mishum Pasumei Nisa, because the whole point over here is to publicize. So you want the menorah on the outside. The kamefarish va'azul, and then the Mechaber goes on to explain ketzad, exactly how do you do this. Im habayis, if the house opens directly onto Rishus HaRabim, you put it by your door. If the house opens to the chutzner, you put it where the chutzner opens to Rishus HaRabim. Chav Beis, v'im yesh chutzner l'ftei habayis, v'chatzer reisein ha'yu psuchais l'Rishus HaRabim. If the house opens onto a chutzner and the chutzner opens onto the Rishos Harabim, then, according to Taisus, according to the Mechaber, you put the menorah by the doorway of the Chatzar to the Rishos Harabim. Now we go to a difficult case. Mechaber, 3 lines down, a little bit past the middle of the line. Ve'im hayadar ba'aliyah. Let's say you live in an upstairs apartment she'ein loy pesach pasuach l'Rishos Harabim, that does not have a doorway that opens onto the Rishos Harabim. Now, what the Mechaber means is, a lot of you right away have a picture in your mind, let's say of an apartment building, and I live on the 3rd floor. According to most poskim, that's not what the Mechaber means. What the Mechaber means is, you have a house. The house has a 2nd floor. Maybe you rent out the 2nd floor of your house. How do the people from the 2nd floor of your house get out to Rishos Harabim? It's not like a 2-family house in Brooklyn, where you have one door from the outside that goes into the 1st floor, and then another door to the outside that goes to a staircase that goes to the 2nd floor. In that case, then the people who live on the 2nd floor have a doorway that goes to Rishos Harabim. In that case, they would light by their door going to the Rishos Harabim. Or if that door opens onto the Chatzar, so fine. So, according to Taisvis, they would also light by the door of the Chatzar going out to Rishos Harabim. The problem that the Mechaber is dealing with is that the people who live in this apartment, they do not have their own doorway, not to Rishos Harabim and not to the Chatzar. How do they get from the apartment outside? They go through the downstairs apartment. So the downstairs apartment has a doorway that goes either to the Chatzar or to the Rishos Harabim. They will light either by their door, which opens on directly to the Rishos Harabim, or if it opens onto the Chatzar, they're entitled to go light by the gateway of the Chatzar to the Rishos Harabim. Their house opens onto the Chatzar. Since their house opens onto the Chatzar, they're one of the houses in the Chatzar. So according to Taisus, they light by the gateway from the Chatzar to the Rishos Harabim. But the people who live upstairs, they don't have a door going to the Chatzar. When they want to leave their house, they go to the downstairs house. Hello, everybody. And then they go from the downstairs house out to the Chatzar to the Rishos Harabim. So they don't have a doorway. Since they don't have a doorway, they cannot light. If this building opens up directly to Rishos Harabim, they can't light by the doorway going to Rishos Harabim. You know why? Because it's not their door. Anybody who sees a menorah by that doorway, the assumption is, oh, that's the people who live over there on the 1st floor. The people who live on the 2nd floor, that's not their doorway. They use that doorway. It's true that they use that doorway, but they're using somebody else's doorway. So it's not their doorway going on to the Rishos Harabim. The same is true if their house opens up onto a Chatzar. Now, according to Taisus, this is a little bit difficult to understand. You see, according to Taisus, if there are 10 houses that open onto the Chatzar, all 10 of those people are going to light by the gateway going from the Chatzar to the Rishos Harabim. So why can't the person living upstairs also put his menorah there? But even according to Taisus, because the Mechaber paskins like Taisus, even according to Taisus, if there are 10 houses opening up onto the Chatzar, then you have 10 families that are entitled to light by the gateway from the Chatzar to the Rishos Harabim. But the guy who lives upstairs, he's number 11. And he doesn't have a door that opens onto the Chatzar. And in the words of the Beis Yosef, when somebody walks by the gateway of the Chatzar, and he sees a whole bunch of menorahs by the doorway to the Chatzar, he looks in the Chatzar, he sees 10 buildings in the Chatzar, so in his mind, he connects all of these menorahs with those 10 households. But there's an 11th household upstairs. He doesn't connect those menorahs to that household. So therefore, says the Mechaber, if somebody lives in an upstairs apartment so that he does not have a doorway that opens to the Rishos Harabim, and in Mishnah Berurah Chav Gimel, the Chavetz Chaim is careful to say, "V'gam ein loy pesach pasuach lechatzar," and if this is a chatzar situation, this fellow who lives upstairs doesn't have a doorway that opens up to the Chatzar. He goes through the downstairs house. Elapsuchi hilabayis. His doorway opens to the downstairs house. He doesn't have a doorway that opens either to the Chatzar or to the Rishus HaRabim. Says the Mechaber, what does this person do? Manichai b'chaloin hasamach l'Rishus HaRabim. Then he puts his menorah in a window that either overlooks the Rishus HaRabim, if this building is located adjacent to the Rishus HaRabim, or in a window that overlooks the Chatzar, if the building overlooks the Chatzar, even according to Tosfos. So again, here's what I want to be very clear about. If the situation that we have here is a 2-story building and somebody lives in the second floor, but he has a doorway that goes to an outdoor staircase and the staircase goes down to the Chatzar or to the Rishus HaRabim, so then he has his own door that goes either to the Chatzar or to the Rishus HaRabim. So if it goes to the Rishus HaRabim, he'll light by his door. If it goes to the Chatzar, he'll light by the gateway from the Chatzar to the Rishus HaRabim. But if this person who lives on the second floor does not have his own exterior door, instead, he has a door that goes to the downstairs apartment and uses the downstairs apartment's door to get out, then he's not entitled to light by his doorway. Not if the doorway opens to the Rishus HaRabim, not if the doorway opens to the Chatzar. He has to light by a window. So says the Mechaber. Now, in the Dirshu footnotes, you can take a look. I'm not going to go through those footnotes now because we simply don't have the time. But in the Dirshu footnotes, they do speak about, and it's more the gay in Eretz Yisrael than it is here, because here the minig is to light inside and by windows, not to light outside. But in Eretz Yisrael, they all light outside. So the Israeli Paiskim, Rabbi Yashiv, Rav Shlomo Zalman, Rav Karelitz, Chazon Ish, they speak very much about apartment buildings in Eretz Yisrael, where the apartments open, the upstairs apartments open onto hallways, or they open onto the staircases. So again, they're not opening up into downstairs apartments. They have their own way of getting to the downstairs front door of the apartment building and going out the main door of the apartment building. So the main door of the apartment building is their door, the same way it's everybody else's door. They don't have less of a claim to the front door of the apartment building than the people who live downstairs do. The front door of the apartment building is a common doorway for all of the apartments on all of the floors of the apartment building. And all of the apartments in the apartment building open onto common areas that all open onto the downstairs front door. So then they're all going to light downstairs outside the main front door of the apartment building. Okay, let's go weiter. 4 lines down in the Mechaber near the middle of the line. Ubishas hasakana, during times of danger. She'ena rashoy l'kayem ha-mitzvah. Very interesting terminology, phraseology of the Mechaber. Ubishas hasakana, during times of danger. She'ena rashoy l'kayem ha-mitzvah. When we are not allowed or able to be mekayem the mitzvah. It's very clear for the Mefarshim that what the Mechaber is referring to over here is a time when we are not allowed to light Neris for the Kiyam HaMitzvah. If the authorities would catch us lighting Neris for the Kiyam HaMitzvah, we would be in danger. Either because they passed Gzeris and they don't want to allow us to be Mekayim the Mitzvah, or because they have some Avodah Zarah type laws that on these days they don't want us to light Neris. But whatever it is, we don't have the option to light outside. We don't have the option to light by a window. We don't have the option to light anywhere where we're making it obvious that we're lighting for the point of the mitzvah. So then what does the Mechaber say? Manichai al shulchanai, put the neris on your table. It's very, very common to have, even nowadays when we have electric lights, somebody wants a romantic dinner, he puts the candles on the table. If he's Malav Malka on Shabbos, L'chvayt Malav Malka, he puts neris on the table. So Manichai al shulchanai, put the neris on your table, v'dayai, and you'll be yaitza with that. Continues the Mechaber. V'tzarech ner acher lehishtamesh la'oiroi. we need an additional ner besides the ner Chanukah, which is going to be the ner that, so to speak, we're going to use for light. What does that mean? It says the Mishnah Berurah, we need an additional ner, lasais heker ladavar. It's not really that we're lighting an extra licht because we're actually going to use it for our lighting purposes. It's more for a heker. Like this. See, this is not really the main place where we're going to learn the halacha of the Shabbos. That comes later on in Hilchos Chanukah. The point over here is that the Mechaber just told you that b'shas sakana you should light on your table. And the reason you're lighting on your table is mamish in order to make it look like you're not lighting l'tzarech mitzvah. Because if it would be obvious that you're lighting l'tzarech mitzvah, you might get in trouble. So the Mechaber said, okay, put the neris on your table. Therefore, says the Mechaber, since you're doing that, you have to make sure to light another ner to show that other ner. That's really the ner that belongs on the table. Yeah, it's normal to have neris on the table. That's that ner. What's this ner? This ner is ner Chanukah. So, bedavke in this case, the Mechaber is pointing out to you that here you definitely need a shamish. Because otherwise, without that shamish, it wouldn't be obvious that this is neris Chanukah at all. By the fact that you have an extra ner, that's what shows, why do you have two? Because this is ner Chanukah, this is lihishtamish la'oirei. Says the Mishnah Berurah, and we just did this, lasis heker l'davar. Okay. Weiter in the Mechaber. V'em yesh madura, if there's some other torch burning in the house, ain't tzarich ner acher, then you don't need a ner acher, because it's obvious that this is for neris Chanukah. V'emu adam chashiv she'ein darka l'shtamish la'ar hamadura, somehow for an adam chashiv it wasn't, they didn't use a madura, then tzarich ner acher, then you do need a ner acher. If you have other lights that are being used for lighting purposes, and therefore it's obvious that the ner that's on the table is the ner shel mitzvah, then you don't need this extra ner. By the way, I want to cover ground, so I'm not going to read it inside. But the Bir Halacha Dibra Maskal v'tzarich ner acher lehistamish la'oira, he goes through. It seems very clearly from this Mechaber that if there's a madura in the room that's giving light, that you don't really need a shamish. So nowadays when we have electric lights and everything else, do you really need a shamish? And in the end, the Bi'ar Halacha brings down from the Meiri. He says, Achein minig ha'olam v'chein minig rabbeinu, the bechol ner Chanukah hamudlekes b'saych habayis, whenever you light ner Chanukah in a house, tzarich ner acheres, you always need a shamish, you always need another ner, afilu loy hayot tzarich l'tashmish, even if it's not needed for light purposes at all, shalo yomru l'tzarich hidlika, so that no one should even have a vaita havamina, that the menorah was lit for lighting purposes, v'chein ani noyeg lamaisa kain kasav ha'meiri. Okay, now we go to Sivav. Manichai lamayla mishloish tfachim. The neris Chanukah are supposed to be placed more than 3 tfachim high from the ground. Now we measure the 3 tfachim by where the flame is, not where the base of the menorah is. So the flame of the menorah should be at least 3 tfachim off of the ground. Says the Mishnah Berurah, why? The chal lamata mishloisha, because anything that's within 3 tfachim to the ground, kilu hiniach bakarka, is considered as if it's laying on the ground. That's the din of lavud. Less than 3 tfachim to the ground, it's as if it's on the ground. Ve'ein nikar shabalabayis henichai sham. Interesting words brought down from the Bach. It's not nikar that it was put there. What do you mean it's not nikar that it was put there? It seems, the Bach is pulling this from a Rashi that's speaking about something else. It seems that what the Bach is saying is, if the neris are so low down, they're within 3 tfachim of the karka, it's considered that the mam is sitting on the ground. Nobody puts something down so low with intent to put it in that place. It doesn't look like something that was intentionally placed over there. It looks like something that was dropped over there. Now, nobody drops a lit menorah, but the point is that this does not look like something that was set up l'tzarech mitzvah. If something was set up l'tzarech mitzvah, it should be a little bit higher up off the ground. It should be like in a makom that has some kind of chashivus. It shouldn't be that it's just like it's sitting on the ground. But b'di'evid you would be yaitza, even if it's within 3 tvachim of the ground. So again, sivav. Manicha l'mayla mishloisha tvachim, the Mechaber said you're supposed to put them higher than 3 tvachim. Mitzvah lahanichai, and there's a mitzvah to place them lamata me'asara tvachim, less than 10 tvachim off the ground, so that the nerois should be less than 10 tvachim off the ground, which is approximately 40 inches. Okay. But if you did place them more than 10 tvachim off the ground, you're yotza. But if you placed them more than 20 amos off the ground, then you're not yotza. Let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah is Chav Zayin. Lamata me'asar tvachim. The language of the Mechaber was it's a mitzvah to place the lichtalach less than 10 tvachim off the ground. Why? Because that makes more pirsum enisa kishul lamata when it's lower than 10 tvachim. Why? The davar ha'asi la'or, because if you would be setting up this menorah for lighting purposes, ein derech lahanicha kol kach lamata. When you're putting up something for lighting purposes, you put them higher up. Whoever saw a lamp down over here? You don't put a lamp so far down. You put it up so that it could cast its light around. So by putting the menorah less than 10 tefachim high, that shows more that it was placed there l'tzarech ha-mitzvah. V'ayin bel Yerabba, the Chavetz Chaim says, take a look at the Yerabba Shekasav writes, Daha de'ena olam nizharin bazeh. We find that the world is not so nizar in this halacha that the neir should be less than 10 tefachim tall. Mishum desaimchen ala Mordechai, they rely on the words of the Mordechai. Shekasav writes, Ta'achshav shehurgalu lahanyach bifnim. Nowadays, when we don't light outside, we light inside. And inside, everybody in your house knows why you're lighting the menorah. If you're lighting inside so that the Ikka Prasume Nisa is inside, and everybody inside your house knows that these are menorahs that are being lit l'tzarech mitzvah, ain't kpeda bazeh. So then there's no great kpeda that we have to light it lower than 10 tefachim, so people should realize that it's l'tzarech mitzvah. Everybody knows that it's l'tzarech mitzvah. However, says the Chavetz Chaim, HaTorah sasa bazeh. The Torah writes this pederach stam. The Torah writes that the mitzvah is to put it less than 10 tefachim. The implication is that the Torah doesn't make a chiluk whether you're lighting inside or lighting outside. Anybody who's medaktik does like the Beis Yosef, they put it less than 10 tefachim tall. Okay, now it happens to be, if you take a look at the Aruch HaShulchan, so the Aruch HaShulchan says, nowadays if you light by a windowsill, the Aruch HaShulchan says, if you're lighting on a windowsill, you could light it wherever you want. You could light it over 10 tefachim, less than 3 tefachim to the windowsill, because the fact that you're lighting it on the windowsill makes the hecker that you're doing it l'tzarech mitzvah. It's very clear that it's l'tzarech mitzvah, so we don't have to worry about this. V'im darba aliyah. Now, says the Mishnah Berurah, how about if you live in an upstairs apartment? Manicha b'chaloin shu l'tzad rishos harabim. You should put it on the windowsill facing Rishos Harabim. Even though by putting the menorah on the windowsill, the flames are going to be more than 10 tefachim tall, you should put it there anyway, just like I said right now from the Aruch HaShulchan. But here is where the Mishnah Berurah, I see why I made a note of the Aruch HaShulchan. Here the Mishnah Berurah, it diverges a little bit, I think, from the Aruch HaShulchan. If you have 2 windows, one is more than 10 tefachim tall from the floor, you should certainly put it in the window that's lower than 10 tefachim. In the shul, the minig is to put the menorah up high. Okay, so what did we have over here to recap so far? The Mechaber said you should put the menorah higher than 3 tefachim off the ground, so it should be nicker that the menorah was placed in this place specifically l'tzarech mitzvah. There's a mitzvah to put them less than 10 tefachim high, because less than 10 tefachim high makes it more noticeable that it was placed over there l'tzarech mitzvah, because if it was placed for lighting purposes, it would have been placed higher so that it would cast its light better. We have the Mishnah Berurah that says if you live upstairs in an apartment and you're putting the menorah by a window, you should put it by the window to get Parsume Nisa to the outside, even if it's more than 10 tefachim off the ground, off the floor of the apartment. Why? Because the inyan of Parsume Nisa is the Iker inyan of Neres Chanukah. That we see in the Gemara. The Gemara talks about Parsume Nisa l'chutz. So certainly if you have the option to light by a window so that there should be an aspect of Parsume Nisa to the outside, to the Rishus HaRabim, we want you to light by the window. It's more than 10 tefachim tall. Better you should light by the window and have the Parsume Nisa l'chutz than you should worry about it being 10 tefachim off the floor and lose the Parsume Nisa l'chutz. And what are you going to gain? You're going to gain that for the people inside, it's more obvious that it was lit l'tzarech mitzvah. They know it was lit l'tzarech mitzvah. So certainly, you should light by the window. Now it's cut l'chav ches. The Mechaber said, L'mayla me'yesr ma'amah, you're not yoytza. Why? D'lo sholta be'ena. Once you're more than approximately 40 feet off the ground, nobody sees it anymore. There's no Parsume Nisa. It makes no difference if you're lighting it outside or you're lighting it inside. If you're more than 40 feet, more than 20 amas off the ground, then there's no inyan anymore. Not only lo yotza, you would have to light over again. You have to have light and make another bracha. Okay, now we go weiter in the Mechaber in Sivav. Go to the Ramah. Let's say you lit more than 20 amas off the ground, and now after you lit, you took the lit menorah, and now you move it and you relocate it to a place that's less than 20 amas off the ground. La yotza, you're not yotza, the hadlaka isa mitzvah, because the mitzvah is accomplished when you light. If you lit in a place where you can't be yotza, if you lit the menorah more than 20 amas off the ground, ball game over. You lit in a place where you weren't allowed to light. That bracha was a bracha of HaTorah. Now you're going to pick up the menorah and move it somewhere else. That doesn't accomplish anything. Your hadlaka was done bad. So you have to put it out, relocate it, make a new bracha, and light again. Says the Mishnah Berurah, but in the flip case, if you lit the menorah in a good place, less than 20 amas off the ground, and then you moved the menorah, and you put it in another good place, because you did the hadlaka in a good spot, and the shtei hamakayim is ksherim. Okay. Says I. So we saw so far, in Sifhei, brought down from the Bryce and Masechta Shabbos, that the Iker Takana of Neres Chanukah was to light outside by the door going to Rishus HaRabim, and if the house opens up onto the Chotzer, the Mechaber Paskid like Taisvis, that you light by the gateway from the Chotzer to the Rishus HaRabim. Says the Mechaber here in Sif Zayin, Mitzvah lahanichoy b'tefach hasamach lapesach. The mitzvah is to place the menorah within a tefach of the doorway, mismoil, to the left of the doorway. So you go to the doorway, you go outside the door, going out into the Rishus HaRabim, place the menorah on the left side. Right now I'm going to say all the way on the left of the doorway, within a tefach of the doorway. So mitzvah lanicha b'tefach hasamach lapesach mismoil, and the reason you're putting it on the left is, says the Mechaber, kidei shetehei mezuzah miyamin. In this way, you can have a mezuzah on the right side of the doorway, v'ner Chanukah mismoil, and you're going to have the Chanukah licht on the left side of the doorway. Continues the Mechaber, v'im ein mezuzah b'pesach. If for whatever reason this doorway does not have a mezuzah, for whatever reason this doorway is not chayiv in mezuzah, so it doesn't have a mezuzah, then manicha miyamin. Then you put the menorah on the right side, because the right always takes precedent over the left. Says the Mishnah Berurah cut lamed aleph, ba'tefach hasamach, you should place the menorah within the tefach of the doorway. Why? Why is that so important? Why does it have to be within a tefach of the doorway? Why can't it be a little bit removed from the doorway? Says the Mishnah Berurah, she'em yachi keno lahalon min hapesach, because if you put it further away from the door, eino nikar shabalabayis anichli sham. Now it's not so connected to the house. Now we don't see it as a davar pashut that the owner of the house put this menorah down by his doorway. Especially if you envision a house that mamish opens up onto the Rishus HaRabim. So if there's a Chanukah menorah sitting in the middle of the Rishus HaRabim, I don't know who put it there. Somebody set up a menorah. I don't know. Some guy came by, decided it would be cute to have a menorah in the Rishus HaRabim, and he plunked the menorah down in the Rishus HaRabim. Now, we're going to start thinking, well, come on, it's right by the door. Yeah, but how are we going to measure what's considered right by the door? How about if it's a foot away from the door? How about if it's 3 feet away from the door? How about if it's 6 feet away from the door? At some point, obviously, the menorah ceases to be connected to the house. So, says the Mechaber, what's that point? A tefach. It's not the Mechaber talking. The Mechaber is taking this from a Menorah of Rabbah in the Gemara in Shabbos. Rabbah says, where should you put the menorah? Within a tefach of the doorway. And Rashi over there says, because if it's within a tefach, then it's nicker that the balabayis put it there. If it's more than a tefach away from the door, it's not nicker anymore. Indeed, Sharetzion Ais Kat Lamed Hey brings down the Rashi from Chav Beis Amud Aleph. Ais Kat Lamed Beis La Pesach, you should put it within a tefach of the doorway. Bein im ha'hanaka hu'al Pesach habayis. This applies to the house that opens directly onto the Rishus HaRabim. So you're putting the menorah within a tefach of the doorway that opens onto the Rishus HaRabim. Oyal Pesach HaChatzer. Or if we're dealing with the Chatzer situation, and you're lighting by the gateway of the Chatzer to the Rishus HaRabim, you put the menorah within a tefach of the gateway going to the Rishus HaRabim for the same reason. Ais Katan Lamed Gimel, we put the menorah on the left of the doorway, Kedei Shetehei, so that on one side you should have, on the right you have the mezuzah, on the left you have the menorah, says the Chavetz Chaim, V'yeh mesubav b'mitzvahs. So now when you go in and out of the house, you're surrounded by mitzvahs. You have the mezuzah on your right and the menorah on your left. Mihu, however, b'di'evet, if you put the Neres Chanukah on the right, you see these pictures from Eretz Yisrael. Like I said, you have an apartment building. Maybe the apartment building has 20 units inside. Not everybody could place the menorah downstairs by the front door of the building within a tefach of the doorway on the left side. So if you look at the pictures, you'll see the menorahs in the glass boxes stacked up and going across the top and coming back down the right side. So this is lechatchila. But if you can't do it, you can't do it. Ais Kat Lamed Dalet. If for whatever reason there's no mezuzah, then you put it miyamin. The chamid did the mitzvah yimin adif, because the right always takes precedence over the left when it comes to mitzvahs. Va'oyed, and there's another reason why you should put it on the right if you can. Dika presume nisa tvei. Chavetz Chaim says there's more presume nisa if you put it on the right. Sha'akol painin l'tzad yamin. Everybody looks to the right before they look to the left. Okay. Continues the Mechaber, top line, Kuf Lamed Tes Amud Beis. V'menichai badeles atzmoi. Let's say you're not putting the menorah. Let's say for whatever reason, you cannot put, like I said, maybe there's a lot of menorahs. So you cannot put the menorah all the way on the left of the doorway within a tefach of the doorway. So v'menichai badeles atzmoi. Let's say you had to actually put the menorah in the doorway, in the open space of the doorway. Yanichenu mechetzyoi shel knisa litzad smol. What you should do is, imagine you're walking into the house, split the doorway in half, and you should place the menorah on the left side of the doorway. So, lichatchila, we said, you should put it all the way on the left. For some reason you can't. So fine. So at least divide the doorway in half and put it somewhere in the left half of the doorway. Says the Mishnah Berurah, this is going back on the beginning of the sif. The beginning of the sif, we said, the mitzvah l'chatchila, all the way on the left of the doorway. You can't put it there, split it in half, but keep it to the left. The opening of the doorway where you go into the house, divide that open space in half, put it somewhere on the left side, which is opposite the mezuzah. That's where you should put it. The implication of this is you could put it anywhere on the left half of the doorway. However, the Chavetz Chaim says, take a look at the Taz. His opinion is you should try to be machmir to go as much left as you can. As close to the doorpost on the left as you can. Okay, let's go weiter. Says the Rama. Haga. We have seen so far the Iker mitzvah is to put the Menorah by the door within a tefach of the doorway on the left side on the outside. Says the Rama. Umiyu. Nowadays, where everybody lights inside, and we're not really going after the Parsumei Nisa L'chutz at all. We're really not focusing on the Parsumei Nisa of the people of the Rishus Harabim because we're lighting inside. Ein lachush kol kach. We don't have to be so concerned. Im ein madlikin batefach hasamach lepesach. So the Ramah seems to be assuming that we're not going to light outside the door. The Iker mitzvah was to light outside the door for the Bnei Rishus Harabim. Says the Ramah, nowadays we don't light outside. It was dangerous to light outside. So you were closing the door to the house and you're lighting inside. But still, everybody knew from the Brisa in Shabbos, where do you light Chanukah licht? The Brisa in Shabbos doesn't say you light Chanukah licht on a window. The only place where the Gemara talks about lighting on a window is the guy who lives in the upstairs apartment. The guy who lives in the upstairs apartment, he doesn't have a doorway to the Rishus Harabim, he doesn't have a doorway to the Chatzar, he lights by a window. Other than that, the Gemara, the Brises, they don't talk about lighting by windows. So where do you light? You light by the doorway. Where do you light by the doorway? On the left side. So says the Ramah, nowadays where everybody lights inside, where are they going to light? They're going to light by the doorway. They're going to come into the house, close the door, and they're going to light on the left of the doorway. But, says the Ramah, now you don't have to worry so much if it's within a tefach of the doorway. Till now we said you have to worry. Why? Because if it's more than a tefach away from the doorway, you're lighting out in the Rishus Harabim. Whose Menorah is it? We don't know whose Menorah it is. So you have to light within a tefach of the doorway. But now, says the Ramah, you're lighting inside the house. Everybody knows whose Menorah it is. So the Ramah says, you're lighting by the doorway inside the house. You don't have to worry so much if it's within a tefach. Ein lachish kol kachim ein madlikin b'tefach hasamach lepesach. Okay. Umikol makayim, nevertheless, haminig lahadlik b'tefach hasamach lepesach kimoy b'yameim ve'ein l'shanis. But it still is the minig to try to get it within a tefach close to the doorway, ve'ein l'shanis, and we shouldn't change the minig. Elim ken rabim b'nei abayis, unless there are a lot of people in the house that are lighting, sha'adif yosef lahad kolechad b'makom b'yuchid, then it's better that everybody should light in his own designated area, mila'oriv haneros, rather than you should have a whole mumble jumble of licht, b'yachad, ve'ein heker kameneris madlikin, and nobody can tell which night of Chanukah it is, because nobody can tell how many neris we lit. Okay. Says the Mishnah Berurah, first let's see a bir halacha. Chavetz Chaim is bothered that the lashon of the Ramah is very strange. First, the Ramah says, "Bezman hazeh, when everybody lights inside, you don't have to worry if it's not within a tefach of the doorway." Then he says, "But the minig is that you should light within a tefach. You don't have to worry, but it is the minig." Says the Bir Halacha Ratza Loimar, "Haminig hanochain lehisnai kach." The best minig would be to make sure to keep it within a tefach of the Pesach, because that's what was established by Chazal. The Ilavach, he says a different aspect. If you don't understand the Ramah that way, the Ramah is just contradictory. Again, why are you doing this? You're doing this only, really, again, the Iker Takanos Chazal was to light by the doorway because it was for the Bnei Rishus Harabim. Now you're lighting inside with the door closed. It's not for the Bnei Rishus Harabim at all. So why are you lighting by the door? So the reason you're lighting by the door is because there's still another inyan. And that is the inyan that you have the mezuzah on one side and the menorah on the other side, and every time you walk through the doorway, you're mesubav b'mitzvahs. That's what the inyan would be. Now comes Mishnah Berurah's Kat Lamed Ches. Ve'ein l'shanois. The Ramah said we should stick to this minute. Now, if you would stop over here, you would say to yourself, so okay, hold it. So I live on the 5th floor of an apartment building. I'm not going to light, and I live in the United States. I'm not lighting outside. So where should I light? Should I light by the window or should I light by the door? It sounds like there's an inyan to light by the door. Why? Because at least you'll be makayim that you have the mezuzah on the right and the menorah on the left, right? Says the Mishnah Berurah's Kat Lamed Ches Ve'ed L'Shanei said become Mokan. If you have a window that faces the Rishus Harabim. So again, the Ramah said, Bizman hazeh, we're not lighting outside. We're not having Presumei Nisa for the Bnei Rishus Harabim. We're lighting inside. He assumed that you're lighting by the door. But that's because the Ramah was dealing with a situation where we're not going after Presumei Nisa to the Rishus Harabim at all. Maybe it was dangerous. Maybe if you lit by a window going to the Rishus Harabim, people would put rocks through your window. So the Ramah was dealing with a case where you're lighting inside under wraps. You don't want your menorah being seen outside. So then light by the doorway and at least accomplish that when you walk in and out of the house, you'll be mesubav b'mitzvahs. But now over here in Ois Kat Lamed Ches says the Mishnah Berurah, if you have a window that overlooks the Rishus Harabim and you can light in that window, it's more important that you should light by the window so that you should accomplish Parsumei Nisa to the Bnei Rishus Harabim. Unless it's dangerous. And the truth is, the Rishiv Zatzal, in a Tshuva in the Igris, he writes this straight out also. He says, if you have any way of accomplishing Parsumei Nisa to the Bnei Rishus Harabim, that is definitely better than lighting by the doorway. Because if you're lighting by the doorway inside, you're not accomplishing the main thrust of what Chazal wanted. The main thrust of what Chazal wanted was to light outside for the Bnei Rishus Harabim. But you're not doing that. You're lighting inside with the door closed. So then the only thing that you're gaining by lighting by the door is this inyan of having the mezuzah on one side and the menorah on the other side, which has nothing to do with the Iker Takana of Presumei Nisa and Neres Chanukah. So if you could light by a window overlooking the Rishus Harabim and you could gain Presumei Nisa to the Bnei Rishus Harabim, that's definitely odif. That's definitely better. But, says the Sharitzir in Ois Kat Membeis, what if you live on the 7th floor of an apartment building? So yeah, you'll light by the window overlooking Rishus Harabim, but you can be 50 feet off the ground in Rishus Harabim. And people don't look up that high. So then you're not accomplishing Parsumei Nisa to the Bnei Rishus Harabim anyway. So then taka light by the door. I remember my grandfather, Oliver Shalom, he used to come to us here in the United States sometimes on Chanukah. We lived on the 5th floor of an apartment building in Borough Park. My father, Oliver Shalom, lit by the window. They said that the 5th floor of most apartment buildings was kind of on the edge of is it higher than 20 amos or not? Reb Ruvain in the Lower East Side, 500C Grand Street, also lived on the 5th floor. He lit by the window also. But my grandfather didn't want to light by the window. He said he thinks it's more than 20 amos tall. So where did he light? he slept, the room that he slept in our apartment, he put up a little table by the door to his room, and he lit on the left side of the doorway, so that he should be Mesubah b'mitzvahs, but he went in and out of his room. Okay, we're going already long, but at least we made some inroads onto Kuf Lamed Tes Amud Beis, trying to pick up ground. So we'll stop over here. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. Source of limud HaTorah should be Megan against Klal Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shalom should send Yeshua for Parnasa Shidduchim to all those in need, and we should be zeichet to see the Bias Gal Tzedek Memher v'Yameinu Amen.